In this video, we're going to be talking about was the Treaty of Versailles fair or unfair. So the contents are overview. What was the Treaty of Versailles? The big three and what did they want? Clemenceau, Lloyd George, and Wilson. The 14 points of the treaty. The 14 points of Wilson. Terms of the treaty, German reactions. Was the treaty fair or unfair? And consequences for the Treaty of Germany. What was the Treaty of Versailles? The Treaty of Versailles was a peace treaty after World War I, which was signed in June 1919. It was written by the Big Three. Germany wasn't allowed to negotiate at all, as was the Central Power states like Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungary, and Bulgaria. And from the Allies, it was Russia. But Russia left the war in 1917 or 18 because of the internal civil war between the Reds and the Whites. So the first IGCSE tip I'm going to share is you might get a 4-mark question for the Versailles Treaty. What was the terms of the Treaty of Versailles? So to answer, you will need to focus on clear facts like land lost by Germany or army restrictions or reparations, the war guilt clause, etc. So the big three. Who were the big three? Clemenceau, the Prime Minister of France, Lloyd George, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and Wilson, President of the United States. So what do the Big Three want? The Big Three were the main leaders who created the treaty. So Clemenceau wanted to prevent security and making sure that the French or France was safe from the future German attacks. Lloyd George was balanced. He wanted to be balanced and he wanted to punish Germany, but he wanted to also be strong enough to trade. Wilson wanted peace, self-determination, and legal nations. He was an idealist, and he was the least harshest. Well, who obviously was the harshest was Clemenceau. He was harsh, very harsh, because France suffered a lot during the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 and 1871 and during World War I. The 14 points of Wilson. I will not talk about all of this, but yeah, I would just talk about the 10th and the 14th point. Austria-Hungary to be provided by the opportunity for self-determination and the creation of the League of Nations. So another IGCSE tip. A common 6-mark question will be asked such as why did the Big Three disagree in Versailles, or why did Lloyd George or Lloyd George disagree with Wilson or something like that. So to score full marks, you have to explain each leader's aims and how the country's experiences in the war influenced them. Like Clemenceau fear of Germany from 2 past wars or something like that. For the differences between, for example, Clemens, what did Lloyd George agree with Wilson every time, something like that. Yeah, just say yes and no and give examples to support the claim. Terms of the treaty. The easy way to remember is by LAM. Use the acronym LAM. Land, army, money, and blame. So L stands for land. They lost land, including 10 or 13% territory, including all former colonies and Alsace-Lorraine. And they can't join with Austria, and they cannot put citizens or people into the Rhineland. They can't join with Austria, even though they're German-speaking people. A stands for army. Army was only 100,000 men, no tanks, planes, and submarines, no conscription, 6 battleships, 15,000 sailors, and no armored vehicles at all. So money, 6.6 billion pounds or 132 billion gold marks for the reparations. This crippled the German economy, and hyperinflation happened 4 years later. Blame. Article 231, War to Kill Clause, which Germany was ultimately fully blamed for the war, but Germany hated this the most, and Germans hated it the most. German reactions. Some people said that it was a stab in the back for some Germans, like the right-wing nationalists. They called it the Germans also called it the Diktat, forced treaty or peace. They felt humiliated. Which they would rather not be humiliated. So the economic collapse for raw reparations, and they would get hyperinflation after that. The anger and revenge caused anger and political instability and revenge, and they will have another war after that. So another IGCSE tip is that if a question asks why Germans hated the treaty so much, use land to explain clearly. So, for example, the loss of land hurt national pride, army limits left Germany weak, reparations damaged the economy, and the war gives cause humiliation. Was the treaty fair? Yes, because it was fair because Germany caused mass destruction in France and Belgium, including atrocities in Belgium. The Allies lost millions of lives, including the French and the British. The Germans imposed harsh treaties, including in Brest-Litovsk in Russia in 1918. They limited Germany's power to prevent another war. The reparations helped to rebuild countries damaged by Germany's aggression. Was the treaty fair? No, it wasn't fair, because Germany wasn't the only country to blame for the war, but also Austria-Hungary, Serbia, but they did in Article 231, which Germany was blamed for the war instead of self-defense. The Germans said they were doing self-defense instead of a war. Diktat, dictated peace. Germany wasn't allowed to negotiate at all. Very high reparations, and it led them to poverty, hyperinflation, and instability. Many Germans were placed under foreign rule, like, for example, Poland or Czechoslovakia. They humiliated the Germans, and they created anger in people such as Adolf Hitler, who took power later on in the 1930s. The political violence. Left wing. Spartacists revolted against Ebert's government in January and later May 1919, as well as in 1920. Ebert sent Freikorps to crush the revolt every time. It succeeded, even though people were killed. Right wing. Conservatives of ex-Kaiser supporters who resented the new Germany during the treaty. In 1920, Kapp-Push, led by Dr. Wilfred Kapp, sent 5,000 Freikorps into Berlin. Ebert ordered the general strike to the industrial workers, and it succeeded. Even though Kapp lost, political violence still happened in Germany. The Ruhr conflict. In 1923, Germany failed to pay reparations, so France and Belgium occupied the Ruhr industry area. Let's see. Germany agreed to pay 6.6 billion pounds, right? In the reparations of that to the Allies. So first, they paid 50 million installments in 1921. but they didn't pay the second installment in 1922, so the French ran out of patience. Ebert tried to negotiate, but the French obviously ran out of patience and invaded together with Belgian troops. The German government and Ebert ordered the workers to go on strike, but the French acted swiftly and ruthlessly, killing over 100 workers. Hyperinflation. The government tried to solve the problem of not having a lot of money by printing even more money, but this was useless and worthless. And this caused a new problem, which is hyperinflation. So the money was virtually worthless, so price skyrocketed and rose up. Wages were paid daily instead of weekly. Some Germans, like the government and big industrialists, didn't suffer at all and didn't suffer and can pay off huge debts. However, the pensioners and of the civilians suffered. This caused chaos and suffering, and also they might have bought a house in 1921, but they can't even get a loaf of bread in 1923.